My son tried to poison me on Christmas Eve. The wine he poured tasted off. My throat burned. I smiled through it, like any mother would, not wanting to ruin the toast. But as I stood from the table and walked toward the kitchen, the floor tilted. My legs wobbled beneath me. Something was wrong. Very wrong. That's when I saw it. On the counter beside Daniel's car keys, a small vial, clear, unlabeled, half full. He hadn't even bothered to hide it. In that moment, everything inside me turned cold. I was never supposed to see that vial. I was supposed to die in that kitchen, quietly, conveniently. He probably planned to call 911 with a choked-up voice, say it must have been my heart. Old age, stress, grief. No, I wouldn't die in that house. And I sure as hell wouldn't hand it over to the son who thought he could outlive me by force. With what strength I had left, I grabbed my phone off the counter. My fingers were shaking so hard I could barely hit the numbers. 911. What's your emergency? Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you're listening from. Just 1 week before the poison, Daniel had called me scared, shaky, desperate. It was after 11 p.m. I remember, because I was already in bed, half asleep, reruns murmuring in the background. When the phone rang, my heart jumped. At my age, that kind of call usually means someone's dead. "Mom," he said, his voice thin and cracking. "I'm in trouble." I sat up, all the old instincts flooding back. "What is it? What's wrong?" "I screwed up," he whispered. "I'm drowning in debt. Please, I need help." $60,000. That's how deep he'd gotten himself, trying to chase some digital get-rich-quick scheme he barely understood. He called it a crypto swing. Said he was leveraged, whatever that meant. All I heard was, gone. He was crying now. I hadn't heard my son cry since his father's funeral. I didn't know who else to call. That part got me. Because even after all the tension, the passive-aggressive texts, the long silences, I still wanted to believe I mattered to him. That under the mess, I was still his mother. His safe place. He said the money was due by the end of the month. Said if he didn't come up with something fast, they might lose the house. Joanna didn't know how bad it was. The kids didn't know anything. He said he was scared. Said he was ashamed. And I believed him, because that's what we do as mothers. We believe the good in them, even when they've given us every reason not to. But even then, I felt something off, not in his voice exactly, but in the timing. It wasn't just the late-night call. It was how fast he launched into numbers, how he kept circling back to my house like it was a lifeboat he thought he deserved. "I hate even saying this," he murmured, "but if you sold your house, you'd have more than enough to help. You're sitting on equity, Mom. It's too much house for one person anyway." There it was. He said it gently, like it was logical. Like giving up the home I'd built with his father was the most practical thing in the world. That was the first time I felt it, that tight little squeeze in my gut. After I said no, Daniel dropped the mask. I told him gently, firmly, that I wasn't selling the house. I explained that I'd helped when I could, that I had bills of my own, and that this home wasn't just property. It was my life. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then his voice turned cold, sharper, calculated. "You're selfish, Mom." Just like that. No hesitation. Sitting in that museum of memories while your grandchildren face the streets, do you even hear yourself? It wasn't a plea anymore. It was an accusation. A weapon. I sat there, stunned, the phone pressed to my ear like it had burned me. Selfish? After everything I'd done? Every sacrifice, every meal skipped so he could have seconds? After putting off retirement to help him with his first mortgage? After watching his kids so he and Joanna could have date nights I never asked questions about? Selfish. "You know what Dad would want?" he snapped. "He'd want you to help your family, not rot away in that empty house clean to the past." And there it was. He invoked his father. He always did that when he wanted to win. Twisted the memory of a good man into a tool to shame me. Used his father's kindness like a crowbar, prying open whatever guilt he thought still lived in me. I said nothing. I didn't trust my voice not to crack. Daniel filled the silence with more poison. "You're just scared to let go. That house is full of junk, dead things. You don't even have anyone to share it with. What are you holding on to, Mom? Pride or control? It was like he'd been waiting to say it all. Years of resentment, of entitlement, of believing that because he wanted something, he deserved it, and I was the barrier. He wasn't scared. He wasn't ashamed. He was angry that I hadn't rolled over. Because Daniel doesn't ask. He expects. And when you don't give him what he wants, he punishes you for making him feel small. I'd seen it before, and the way he talked to Joanna when she disagreed with him, and how he disciplined the kids with a cold edge that made my stomach twist. It was subtle. Controlled. The kind of cruelty that doesn't scream. It cuts just deep enough that you bleed alone. And in that moment, I realized something that made my chest ache. He hadn't called for help. He'd called to make a deal. And when I said no, he decided I was expendable. After he hung up, I just sat there with the phone in my lap, trying to make sense of what I'd heard. $60,000. Lost. Not to a bad investment, not even to a scam. Just some crypto dip he thought he could outsmart. My son, the boy who used to get nervous ordering food at a restaurant, was now tossing money at digital coins like they were magic beans. And somehow, when it all went wrong, his first call was to me. It should have meant something, that he still saw me as his safety net, his lifeline. But it didn't feel like trust. It felt like expectation. Still, I couldn't stop the ache in my chest. I wanted to protect him. God help me, even now. I wanted to fix it, because I didn't raise a fool. I raised a kind, gentle, wildly curious boy who used to ask me questions about the stars and cry when the neighbor's cat went missing. I remembered one Mother's Day. He must have been about 10 when he gave me a wrinkled yellow card he'd made in secret. On the front, he'd drawn me as a superhero in an apron. Inside, in crooked block letters, he'd written, "I'll always take care of you, Mom, even when I'm a grown-up." I kept that card for years, until it faded, until it crumbled at the folds. Now I was staring at a version of that boy who didn't recognize the woman who raised him, not unless she could wire him cash. How did we get here? He told me it was just a temporary setback, that he had a strategy to turn it around. He talked fast, like he was trying to convince himself too. Every other sentence was jargon. Coins, tokens, leverage, liquidity. None of it made any real-world sense. And all I could think about was the stack of unopened bills in my own kitchen drawer. Property tax coming due. Insurance up for renewal. The kind of quiet, unglamorous things you deal with when you've spent your life being careful. Daniel was never good with money. But this wasn't just bad luck. It was a spiral. And I could see him dragging Joanna and the kids down with him. Dragging me with him. He ended the call with, "Just think about the house, Mom." I did, but not the way he wanted me to. I thought about it as the last thing I had. The last piece of my life that hadn't been broken or borrowed. And now my son, my sweet, smart, scared son, was gambling his way toward losing it all. 3 days passed before he called again. This time, his voice was honey. "Hey, Mom," Daniel said, light and breezy, like our last conversation hadn't ended in guilt and silence. "Listen," I was thinking, "why don't you come over for Christmas Eve dinner? The kids miss you. No talk of money, I promise. Just family. Just family." He said it like it still meant something. I paused. I didn't say yes right away. My stomach twisted, like it always did when something didn't sit right. But then I heard Lily giggling in the background, and my heart softened before my brain could catch up. "You sure?" I asked. "I don't want to cause any tension with Joanna." "Joanna's totally fine with it," he said too quickly. "She's making roast beef and everything. I'll come pick you up. Seriously, Mom, we just want you there." He sounded like the boy who used to sit in my lap and beg for one more bedtime story, that same needy warmth under all the charm. And maybe I needed it too. I missed my grandchildren, missed being part of something, missed the feeling of belonging somewhere during the holidays. So I said yes. I told myself it was about the kids, that no matter what Daniel was going through, I couldn't punish Lily and Ben for it. I told myself I could keep boundaries, that I could visit, eat, smile, and go home without giving anything more than my presence. I told myself a lot of things, But under all those excuses lived something harder to admit. I wanted to believe him, that maybe the panic in his last call had shaken him. Maybe he'd had a come-to-Jesus moment and realized family mattered more than money. Maybe he remembered who I was, not just as a bank account, but as his mother. I clung to that fantasy like an old sweater, threadbare and familiar. The truth? I was lonely. And even as my gut whispered no, my heart said, maybe this time it'll be different. So I baked gingerbread cookies like I used to. I wrapped a few small gifts for the kids. I ironed the good blouse, the one Daniel always said made me look like some fancy PBS lady. And on Christmas Eve, I let him pull into my driveway with a smile on his face and an open passenger door. He looked calm, relaxed, like everything was fine now. I ignored the knot in my stomach. I got in the car. I hadn't set foot in Daniel's house since Easter. When he opened the front door that night, it felt like I was crossing into something sacred, or doomed. It was beautiful. The kind of warm, curated perfection you see in holiday catalogs. Golden candles flickered along the mantel. Pine garland twisted around the stair railing. Stockings hung by the fireplace, names embroidered in red thread. Even mine, dusted off and rehung like I'd never been missing. I smelled roast beef, cloves, fresh-baked bread. For a moment, it almost knocked the air out of me. The smell of something that felt like love. And then they came running. My grandbabies. "Grandma!" Lily shouted, arms wide and legs flying across the hardwood like she hadn't seen me in years. Ben barreled after her, nearly knocking me off balance as he hugged my legs. Their small, sticky hands clutched at my coat, my wrists, my scarf. Lily wanted to show me her glitter reindeer. Ben needed help with a paper crown. Both were bubbling over, like children do when they're finally seen. And just like that, something cracked inside me. I looked up and caught Daniel watching from the kitchen doorway. He smiled, soft and tired, a glass of wine in his hand. He looked normal, familiar, like the man I used to know. And in that moment, God help me, I let myself believe this was real, that maybe, somehow, we were coming back together. That maybe all that bitterness over money was just fear, pressure, a phase. That maybe being surrounded by his children and his mother at Christmas had reminded him who he was. Maybe he'd remembered that family wasn't a resource. It was a promise. I set the cookies down on the counter and took off my coat while the kids dragged me to the tree. Joanna even smiled, tight-lipped and pale, but polite. She offered to take my bag. Her hands trembled a little. We sat around the living room, the fire glowing behind us, the lights on the tree blinking softly. Daniel poured me a glass of wine and handed it to me personally. "Just one," he joked. "You'll start singing carols," I laughed. So did he. For the first time in a long time, I felt something rise up inside me that I hadn't let myself feel since before Daniel's phone call that night. Hope. Maybe we were fixing something. Maybe I had my son back. Dinner was nearly ready. Joanna carved the roast in the kitchen while Daniel poured the wine. The kids were still giggling in the den, sticky with candy canes and glitter glue. The dining room table was laid out like something from a Hallmark movie. White linen, polished silver, little sprigs of rosemary tied around the napkins. Joanna had even folded them into stars, something she must have found on Pinterest. We all sat down, and for a brief moment it felt right. "Before we eat," Daniel said, raising his glass, "I just want to say thank you." I looked up. His voice was gentle, calm. His eyes, dark like his father's, settled on me. "For family," he continued. "For second chances. For forgiveness." Joanna wouldn't meet my eyes. She kept adjusting the salt shaker. Her napkin was already twisted tight in her lap. Daniel held his glass higher. To putting the past behind us. To moving forward. Together. I felt something shift then. Something I couldn't name yet. But I lifted my glass anyway. I didn't want to ruin the moment. I wanted this to be real. We clinked. The crystal rang out like a bell. I took a sip. The wine was red, smooth, almost too smooth. velvety, expensive. Not the kind Daniel usually bought or could afford, but I didn't question it. Not out loud. I smiled, gave him a soft nod. To family, I echoed, the clink of glasses, the laughter of children from the next room. The smell of roast beef, garlic, something sweet in the oven. Everything looked right. Everything sounded right. But something was wrong. It started with a wave of heat. Then came the spinning. The room tilted sideways, just a little, like the floor had shifted beneath my feet. But I was sitting. There was no reason for the world to move like that. I blinked hard. My stomach twisted in a slow, nauseating churn, the kind that makes your mouth water before it makes you sick. I reached for my water glass, but my hand shook so badly it nearly tipped over. Daniel was beside me in an instant. "Mom?" he said, voice soft, too soft. "Are you all right?" His hand hovered just over my back, not touching me, watching me struggle, pretending to help. I wanted to tell him not to touch me. I wanted to throw the wine glass across the room, but I couldn't even stand up. "I'm fine," I murmured, but the words felt wrong in my mouth. Slow, slurred. That's when I saw Joanna, still in the kitchen doorway, twisting her napkin into a rope. Her eyes kept darting to Daniel. She wasn't blinking. She looked like someone waiting for a scream that hadn't come yet. Daniel crouched beside me, still playing the role. "Maybe it's your blood pressure," he said, frowning like a son in a commercial. "You've been under a lot of stress lately." He said it gently, kindly, like he cared. But his eyes, there was nothing in them, not worry, not fear, just calculation. Every touch, every word, every gesture. It was theater. It wasn't my son kneeling next to me. It was a man watching his plan unfold. And that hurt, worse than the poison. My heart pounded, not just from panic, but from the betrayal curling tight in my chest. My vision blurred, but I forced myself to focus on the one thing I knew. I had to stay awake. I couldn't let this happen. Not here. Not like this. "I just need a moment," I said, even as the world tilted again. Daniel nodded solemnly. "Of course. Take your time. Let me help you to the kitchen. Maybe get some air." He took my elbow, gently, like a good son would, like a son who loved his mother. And it was that kindness, that lie, that nearly broke me, because the boy who once cried when I scraped my knee was now walking me to my death. Each step down the hallway felt heavier than the last. My limbs were lead. My heart thudded in my ears, uneven and furious. I couldn't tell if the floor was crooked or if my body was already failing. The kitchen light buzzed faintly overhead. Too bright, too harsh. I gripped the edge of the counter, trying to catch my breath. My skin was damp with cold sweat. I could feel it trickling between my shoulder blades, soaking through the nice blouse I'd ironed just hours earlier, the one I wore to look like someone who still mattered. The nausea hit hard. My stomach twisted, then rolled. I thought I might be sick right there on the tile. I braced myself, eyes fixed on the countertop. And that's when I saw it. The vial, small, clear, unlabeled, just sitting there beside Daniel's car keys, like it belonged there, like it was just another ingredient in the meal. A bead of liquid clung to the inside of the glass, catching the light in a way that made my stomach turn all over again. I stared at it, frozen, not breathing, not blinking, because I knew I'd spent my entire life giving that boy the benefit of the doubt, excusing sharp tones, justifying selfishness, filling in the gaps with love and hope and what I thought I saw in him. But that vial? That was intent. That was premeditation. I reached for it with a trembling hand. It was light, fragile, cold, just like him. I thought back to the wine, the smoothness, the strange heat, the way Joanna had avoided eye contact all evening, the way Daniel had watched me sip, not fondly, not proudly, but like a man taking inventory. He did this. He knew what it would do. He planned for it. He poured it himself. I sank to the stool by the counter, holding the vial in both hands like it might disappear if I looked away. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't him panicking or losing control. This was careful, clean, chosen, and it hit me harder than any poison could. He didn't just want my help, he wanted me gone, so he could have the house, so he could clean up the debt I wouldn't pay, so he could inherit, sell, move on, all without the inconvenience of a living mother. It didn't matter what I'd done for him, what I'd sacrificed, how much I loved him, because now I wasn't his mother. I was a liability. I didn't hear him come in, but I felt him before I saw him, like a cold draft cutting through the room. I was still sitting on the stool, the vial resting in my hand like evidence from a crime scene I never wanted to believe existed. My voice came out small. Cracked. You poisoned me. Daniel stood in the doorway, framed by the soft light from the dining room. He didn't flinch, didn't rush forward to deny it. He didn't even look surprised, just calm, almost impressed. Smart woman, he said with a small shrug. Even dying, you figured it out. It wasn't what he said that broke me. It was how casual it was, like we were discussing a parking ticket. Or a bad investment. I stared at him, waiting for something, a flicker of regret, a shadow of shame. But there was nothing. His face was smooth, familiar, the same one that used to beam at me from grade school photos and cry into my neck after nightmares. Now he looked at me like I was a problem he thought he'd already solved. You would have left everything to me anyway, he said, as if that justified it. The house, your savings, it was all going to me eventually. Eventually? I echoed, barely recognizing my own voice. Daniel stepped into the kitchen and leaned against the counter like he owned the room. You were never going to help. You were too nostalgic, stuck, holding onto a house you didn't need, a life that's already over. I blinked hard, trying to keep my vision steady. The warmth in my chest had turned to ice. You have no idea what I've been carrying, he continued. The debt? The stress? You think raising a family is easy right now? You think I could afford to wait another 10, 15 years for you to finally let go? Let go. That's what he called it. He wasn't just desperate. He was entitled. Like I owed him my home, my savings, even my absence. I thought about all the chances I'd given him, all the times I'd overlooked the warning signs, the lies, the cold tone when I said no. I thought about the call for help, the carefully arranged dinner, the soft invitation wrapped in guilt and sweet words. It hadn't been a mistake. It had been a plan. He didn't see me as his mother anymore. He saw me as an obstacle, a number on a piece of paper, a name on a deed he thought should already be his. And now, standing in that kitchen, I realized he was done waiting. I looked at my son and realized I wasn't looking at a man who'd lost his way. I was looking at someone who had calculated this and still felt justified. He stepped closer, eyes locked on mine. There was no hesitation in him now, no panic, just bitterness, sharp and practiced. You want to know why? He said, his voice low but steady. Because you're selfish. The word hit like a slap. I wanted to scream, to shake him, to remind him that I was the one who held him when he cried, that I was the one who helped him with his first down payment, watched his kids every weekend, made casseroles, and paid for swim lessons, and sat alone every holiday he was too busy to remember. But none of that mattered. Not to him. He smiled, like this was already over. Now, it'll all be mine, he said. Simple property law. Happens all the time. You're gone, and everything moves forward. It was so cold. Colder than the thing he'd poured in my glass. At least poison works quickly. This was slow, deliberate, thought out. I clutched the edge of the counter, forcing myself to breathe. Lila and Ben, I whispered. They love me. That was the only card I had left. The children. Surely, even he couldn't explain that away. But Daniel didn't blink. He just smirked. They'll get over it. I felt the air leave my lungs. They're kids, he said with a shrug. They'll be sad for a while, then they'll adjust. Joanna and I will tell them it was natural. Or unexpected. Something peaceful. We'll figure it out." He paused, then added with a glint of something cruel. "Besides, they'll enjoy the inheritance one day." That's when I truly understood. I wasn't a person to him anymore. Not a mother. Not a grandmother. I was a name on a title, an insurance policy, a set of keys, a line item in a spreadsheet of solutions. This wasn't about stress or desperation or even fear. This was about removal, a clean slate, a future without me in it. I don't know what kept me conscious, rage, fear, or just pure defiance, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to die in that kitchen. Daniel turned away for just a second, maybe to check the hallway, maybe to think, but in that sliver of time, I saw it. My phone. It was sitting on the edge of the counter, right where I'd left it when I first came in, within arm's reach, plain as day. I moved slowly, pretending to shift my weight, leaning just enough to stretch my fingers across the marble. My hand closed around it, slick with sweat. He turned back and froze. Too late, with everything shaking. My body, my breath, even my vision. I unlocked the screen. Muscle memory did the work. I couldn't see the numbers clearly, but I knew where they were. 911. My thumb hit the call button. I didn't wait for the dispatcher to speak. "This is Margaret Holloway," I gasped. "My son, he poisoned me. I have the vial. Please send help. I'm at his address." "I think I'm—" A crash behind me. Daniel lunged. He tried to grab the phone, but I stumbled backward, nearly falling into the wall. My back hit the pantry door. Pain bloomed up my side. But I didn't let go. "They have our address," I said, staring him in the eye. "They heard everything. If you touch me again, it's over." He stepped back, chest heaving, hands shaking. "I was trying to fix things," he shouted. "You don't understand, Mom. You left me no choice." "No," I said, my voice low, sharp. "You had every choice. You just didn't like any that didn't end with you taking what wasn't yours." He ran a hand through his hair, eyes darting toward the window. "You think they'll believe you? You're old, confused. I'm sick because of you. I've got the vial. You think they won't test it?" We stood there in a tense, horrible silence. He was breathing hard, frozen between fight and flight, and I was done being afraid, because now he knew I wouldn't go quietly. He thought I'd be too shocked, too fragile to act, but he was wrong. I looked him straight in the eye, steady as I could manage. If they don't hear from me again, they'll come. And for the first time that night, I saw it in him. Fear, real, honest fear, not of losing his mother, but of getting caught. Outside, tires screeched against the pavement. Then came the sirens, louder, closer, not the distant hope of help, but the blaring sound of arrival. Daniel's head snapped toward the window. His whole body locked up, and for a second he looked like a child caught sneaking out. Only this wasn't a prank. This was a crime. A big one. Red and blue lights painted the living room walls, flashing over the tinsel and the stockings like something holy crashing into something rotten. Joanna stepped into the hallway just as the first officer pounded on the door. She didn't say a word. She didn't move. Her face was pale and blank, like someone watching a movie they already knew the ending to. Then, "Police! Open the door!" Daniel hesitated. "Daniel," I said hoarsely from the kitchen floor, "open it, or they'll break it down." He didn't look at me. He just walked stiffly to the door and unlatched it with trembling hands. 2 officers stormed in. Their eyes scanned the room fast. They saw me. An older woman collapsed on the kitchen floor, shaking, pale, struggling to sit upright. A female paramedic followed close behind, her gloved hands already reaching for me. "He poisoned me," I said, my voice raspy but clear. I lifted my hand, still clutching the tiny glass vial. "It's here. He poured it in my drink." The officers moved on instinct. One spoke into his shoulder mic. The other turned to Daniel. "Sir, please step back and keep your hands where we can see them." "What? No, this is a mistake," Daniel stammered, arms halfway raised. "She's confused. She's old and sick. She called us herself," the female officer said flatly. "We heard the beginning of the call. We have her statement. We'll take it from here." Daniel looked at Joanna. She didn't speak. She didn't even meet his eyes. They cuffed him right there in the entryway, in front of the Christmas tree, the roast beef, and the glass of wine still sitting on the table. I watched as he was led out the door, into the flashing lights, past the neighbors who were now gathering on their porches in robes and slippers. And in that moment, something deep inside me broke, not just from the betrayal, not just from the poison, but from the realization that my child, my son, the one I raised and protected, had tried to erase me like I was nothing. They walked him out in handcuffs, and the whole street watched the mask come off. Daniel didn't go quietly. Of course he didn't. "Mom!" he shouted, twisting in the officers' grip as they guided him down the porch steps. "You're destroying this family. Do you hear me? You're tearing us apart." His voice cracked, part fury, part desperation, part something so childish it almost embarrassed me, but it was too late for shame. The red and blue lights lit up the neighborhood like a stage, and one by one the audience came out. Porch lights flicked on. Doors opened. First came the Parkers across the street, then that quiet woman from the corner house, the teenage boy with headphones, the new couple in 12B, faces in windows, phones in hands, mouths slightly open. They all watched the golden boy, the homeowner, the family man, the one who shoveled driveways for elderly neighbors and hosted barbecues in July, get loaded into a squad car. And then the murmurs began. "Is that Daniel Holloway? Oh my God, is that his mother? She called the cops on her own son? No, they said he poisoned her. Poisoned. I heard she found something in the kitchen. Did you get that on video? I'm recording." Joanna stood in the doorway, one hand on the frame, frozen like a statue. Her eyes were dry, her lips pressed into a thin, unreadable line. And behind her, I saw Lila and Ben, half hidden behind her skirt, peeking out through the legs of adults too stunned to explain what was happening. Lila clutched a stuffed bunny to her chest. Ben just stared, his little mouth open, watching his father being driven away in the back of a police cruiser, the same car he used to pretend was a race car, when Daniel let him sit in the front seat. Daniel kept shouting, "Mom, tell them it's a mistake. You're confused. You're not well." I didn't answer. The paramedics were still checking my vitals, but my eyes stayed locked on the scene outside, on the neighbors, the whispers, the recording phones. And for the first time in this nightmare, I felt something close to peace. Because they saw it. They all saw it. After years of smiling pictures, holiday cards, barbecue invites, and borrowed ladders, the truth had finally cracked through Daniel's polished exterior like glass under pressure. He tried to make me disappear, and now the world knew. They say betrayal leaves scars. But what they don't tell you is how long justice takes and how cold it feels when it finally comes. Daniel was arrested that night for attempted murder, intent to defraud, and tampering with evidence. They found the vial, the wine glass, and later, a second bottle already laced and hidden in the garage fridge, as if he'd planned for another attempt. The toxicology reports confirmed everything. It was real, it was deliberate, and it was traceable. 3 months later, I sat in a courtroom, still pale and weak, a blanket across my legs, while a jury of strangers listened to the details of how my son tried to end my life over a house he didn't earn and a future he thought he deserved. I remember watching him walk into that courtroom in a wrinkled suit, wrists cuffed, eyes empty. He didn't look at me once, Joanna testified, quietly, clearly. She admitted she'd known something was wrong, but Daniel told her I was unstable, that I'd been forgetting things, imagining threats, gaslighting, in legal terms, manipulation, in life. The prosecution laid out the financial trail: credit card debt, crypto accounts drained, pawned electronics, even loans taken out in Joanna's name. He had been drowning. And instead of grabbing a life preserver, he tried to sink me with him. The judge didn't flinch. Daniel was sentenced to 18 years in prison, no chance of parole before 12. They called it a calculated act with clear intent, made worse by the fact that it was aimed at a parent. The very person, the judge said, who once gave him life. Joanna filed for divorce the same week. She apologized to me in the hallway after the sentencing. She cried. I held her hand. I didn't blame her. Not anymore. She was another victim in the wreckage he left behind. The kids don't know everything. How could they? They were told Daddy made some very bad choices and had to be somewhere else for a long time. I don't know what they'll believe when they're older, but they still come to visit me, still run into my arms, still call me Grandma. The house, the one Daniel was so desperate to take, feels different now, quieter, wiser, like it remembers. I walk those halls not with grief, but with clarity. He made his choice, and now I've made mine, to live, to tell the truth, and to never again doubt my instincts, even when they point to someone I once loved more than life itself.